So good morning all. Today is the fifth session on Preface to Lyrical Ballads. We are continuing with the discussion of the essay. So paragraph number up to paragraph number 7th we have dealt. Actually, in this in your case we have paragraph up to paragraph number 12 under prescription, right? So paragraph number up to 1 to 12 it is prescribed in the syllabus as such. That's why we are talking about paragraph wise division, or otherwise also in the case of dealing with the literary criticism and theory, any essay prescribed, this is one of the best options, okay, or preferable options to deal with paragraph each division or discussion. That will be really better for better understanding. So let me start with the paragraph number 8. So as usual I am going to get you the major points first, and later we will go for reading the essay. Hope that presentation is there, please. Yeah. So subject, next he starts with, so you know what is happening here. Wordsworth refers to lyrical ballads, and what is the stance of the poet, or these poets in general as a whole, how they are challenging the already existing traditions like neoclassicism. They are contemporaries also. They are not really happy about, because of their unlikely or one way or other sticking on to the strict norms in composition, in writing, theme, subject matter. See, neoclassic tradition or the contemporaries and their predecessors, romantic revival we are witnessing, and their predecessors like, or the contemporaries like a neoclassic tradition, they were very strict about, and these people want to challenge that strictness or to make it more easy and simplistic. So this is what is happening with the Wordsworth and his other co-writers. So Coleridge and many other persons, you know, Shelley, Keats, all these people were holding the same kind of a stance in their composing poetry. At approach towards selecting the theme and subject matter, they also held the same opinion. Okay. And of course, see, personal individual differences, individual other ideas are there, but still as a whole, romantic revival or any romantic literature means this, that is challenging that kind of a strict or unlikely rule-bound composition and all, and declaring a kind of freedom in choosing the subject matter, making it more simple. So these are the basic ideas around which we are discussing this essay. So that's clear. Now, subject is indeed important. He says subject. What do you mean by the subject? In the context of Wordsworth or any poet, any person talking about subject in a literary context or literature, context of literary composition, that is of course the subject of writing. Subject, it's not like we talk about subject, maths as a subject, English also as a subject we talk. In academic context, English is a subject. Which is your subject? It's English. Maths, as other people talk about maths, physics, chemistry as their subject of study. English is actually, of course, it is a language, but in our case, it is the subject. Okay, but here he talks about the subject as the subject that he chooses, for, or any writer chooses for the composition of poetry. Okay, so subject is indeed important, so that it is really important. Okay, fine. For the human mind is capable of being excited without the application of gross and violent stimulants, and he must have a very faint perception of its beauty and dignity. We'll tell you, great national events, increasing accumulation of men in cities, craving for extraordinary incident, rapid communication of intelligence, hourly gratified. So this is a kind of sarcasm. You will understand once I explain. He tells that subject is indeed important. Of course, subject is important. But what does he add with that? We have many subjects nowadays to discuss. That is, in the cities, people are flowing to the city in search of complication, sophistication. You fail. Nowadays, what we know, with the urbanization, what happens? Do we become really simple? Do we actually become really simple? No. We become every day, day after day, we become complicated. And we know how Wordsworth talked about the way choosing this simple or the real daily life language of men has been preferred by these romantic writers as opposed to the former or the contemporary neoclassic tradition, who really wanted to make it very complicated. This neoclassic tradition or any other predecessors really didn't choose to write or choose the language of men that is really used by men without making any coloring. That's why I discussed that dialect and how sometimes when we try to color our dialect, see for example Kannur dialect, then it becomes really awkward. So selecting it as such and using it in poetry or any literary writing is preferred, of course, we know. And in that case, we see here, he says the subject is indeed important. So human mind is capable of being excited without the application of gross and violent stimulants, and he must have a very faint perception of its beauty and dignity. So that is a normal statement. So human mind is capable of catching anything and everything happening all around. But provided that you have a poetic bent, creative bent, you will definitely be able to compose poem. It is not very particular that it is not really necessary that you should have all those the so-called high standard as told by the neoclassic tradition or any other strict traditions. But anything can be the subject matter of your poetry. See, that's why we talked about garden, flowers, rivers, brooks, everything can be your subject matter. But what he says, great national events increasing accumulation of men in cities. Former contemporaries, see, they wanted these great many events, wars. That is really important. Is it really, does he mean that? No. He is against these complications in life or the urbanization and people getting estranged from nature. This is a turning, going back to nature. Very simple terms, if you talk in very simple terms, romanticism is essentially going back to nature. You are emphasizing nature, the natural beauty. Whatever is given by nature, you are praising and you are happy about. So that is the point of that part, and he is not really happy about the great national, so-called great national events. Okay, increasing accumulation of men in cities. What does he mean there? He means nothing but urbanization and how people are estranged from nature or how they are destroying nature. We know how paddy fields are somewhere in one way or other, those are shifted, those are erased for the sake of having skyscraper buildings, construction of buildings, and how our natural beauty gets affected in that regard as well. Okay, yeah. So the time is approaching when the evil will be systematically opposed by men of greater powers and with far more distinguished success. That is the part. That is the point with which he ends that paragraph number 8. And what does he say there? The time is approaching. Of course, the time is coming when the evil will be systematically opposed. This is an evil. This is an evil, that is this urbanization, or you are turning away from nature, going away from nature. This is an evil, and of course time will prove that this is not the real life. And you will, of course, the men of greater powers. Whom does he mean, the men of greater powers? Of course, this romantic literature, the people belonging to the tradition of romantic literature. They will be able to challenge this evil of going away from nature, or turning, being satisfied in urbanization and sophistication. What do you mean by sophistication? Complication. Okay, making it more tough. So, of course, he says that literature has the moving power. There is no doubt. I think you don't have any doubt about that, do you? No. When we say, when I say a court, you start thinking about that. You try to connect it with that. That is the power of literature. A very philosophical sentence may be just a part of a novel that you are reading. But if that makes you think, or if that is somewhere capable of making you think about the truth or relevance of that, that is the moving power of literature. And of course, at that time, Wordsworth thinks about, or is confident about, making it more better, making the situation more better with the what they have in mind, or what technique they are going to adopt, like choosing the incidents and incidents from the daily life of human beings without making much coloring, using their language as such, and this kind of simplicity will bring a change. He says that the innocence of people, innocence of literature is at stake, it is losing. But we will be able to retrieve that with the men of greater power, the men of receive. Words are sharper than swords, we say, because that's why we always say that, right? Say words are more powerful. That's why these people nowadays, politicians, even the politics which takes a fascistic turn, they are really worried about the men of letters, human beings who are learned. That's why they turn against universities and other educational centers. First, their main target becomes the same, because of this reason, because of the same reason that if you are learned, you will be able to bring challenge. You will be able to challenge the negatives of the society. If you are learned, if you are capable of writing, you will be raising your voice. Or at least if you are learned, if you have a voice of your own, that will be a positive turn for the society sooner or later. And that's what he says here. And for with distinguished success, we will succeed. Of course, nowadays we have this criticism. Wordsworth says about the harsh criticism he had to suffer from Quarterly Review and many other contemporary reviewers, but he is confident that sooner or later, one day, we will be accepted. Our new style, our new concept of writing shall be accepted as such. Okay, so this is the way he ends that paragraph number 8. Okay. So now paragraph number 9. Poem style. He is talking about style of poems. Okay. The main point, it's personification of abstract ideas. He tells personification of abstract ideas. Please be careful. He utterly rejected as an ordinary device. He, or the romantic literature, utterly rejected as an ordinary device to elevate the style and raise it above prose. See here, please listen to the sentence, personification of abstract ideas. Please look into the presentation, look at the passage, the beginning itself. You can see this sentence, personification of abstract ideas. What do you mean by personification? Or let me say abstract ideas. We talked about abstract noun, concrete noun, and for the easy understanding, I used it to test the concrete wall of our class and told you this is concrete. That means I can touch it. A pen is a concrete object that we can touch. and the real opposite of the same, that is something which cannot be touched, is called abstract. It exists just as idea. Okay, so that is the way we have abstract ideas. Night, sincerity. Can you touch it? You wear a watch and I can touch that watch, and I tell that you are sincere, but I cannot touch that sincerity. So this is the way this differs. This differs in this way. That is, abstract ideas are ideas which are just as forms, that just exist as ideas. And he talks about, Wordsworth tells about this personification of abstract ideas. See, you know, metaphysical poetry and all such other complicated kind of literature came before, recently or even before this romantic tradition. They were taking all these methods, they were adopting all these methods like these abstract ideas, something which is beyond our normal plane of understanding. Okay, metaphysic itself means metaphysical, beyond physical. Physical is the part where we can touch these whatever you mention, you can see and you can touch. Others are just existing as ideas. And of course, the understanding of those ideas really depends upon your extreme intellectual power. Some people can never understand a metaphysical poetry at one or two sitting, because it's something beyond our level of experience. But what about Wordsworth singing about a solitary reaper? Of course he can. Of course I can. You can. Anyone can. Because even we didn't see a solitary reaper, or even we do not see her for years, but we have seen as a real person, existing person of the song, somewhere we are familiar with. And that's why Wordsworth is very particular about throwing away or rejecting these personifications of abstract ideas. He never wants that to happen. He never wants that to be one of the techniques of his writing. Okay? So utterly rejected as an ordinary device to elevate the style. What do I mean by elevating? Please note down these new words. Elevating means raising it somewhere, giving it too much of importance, not the same way, but here you can take that to be as a weapon to raise it at the higher level. Elevate the style. That is, you are making it more stylish. For that you are bringing too much of abstract ideas, and it will never bring any originality. That's what he says. And raise it above prose. Raise it above prose. Prose, you know, you have studied prose, and we know the way prose gets you the theme. You know, it's not that complicated. In prose, you have seen the works prescribed, and even complicated prose writings are there, but still somewhere we can understand with see, just think about Miss Beam's School. That is one part of prose writing. So it's somewhere it reads like a story. You can read it like a story, but it's about making it more complicated. Abstract ideas, personification. And another point, personification, that also is to be discussed. What do you mean personification? Personification is normally, you know, personification, the best example can be the way you personify something as, you see, just sometimes, you know, idolatry. Idolatry means that you are worshipping stone or any other some object as a godly symbol. You know, you make some statues of God and you feel like they are personified. See, this is a personification. Even to the higher plane, you know, human gods. You say that they are personification of such and such godly qualities and all. No, in Hinduism you can see a number of gods there. They have that much gods in Hinduism, like these, you know, I don't have to mention the names, you know, how human gods, and they see these people who believe them, they point out, or they make that, they ascribe the qualities in them, like they have the such and such powers, and this is the way personified, some qualities attributed to. So this is the way he says personification of abstract ideas. Some ideas you personify in some object and you write it as poetry, so that the writer who writes that may be really well aware of that, or even those who have his intellectual capability, who are equal to his intellectual capability, they also understand it easily. But what about the layman readers like us? We may find it very difficult to understand, to grasp the poetry. It's those poetry enriched with these kinds of personifications and many other stylistic devices. You know, poetic devices you studied, many poetic devices you know, and many others are there. You studied it according to the prescribed path, and they were not too much in number. To start from the simplistic plane, it's a simile metaphor. From there we started, and we went up to synecdoche, and after very simple terms we discussed as per our prescribed part, but more than that are available. And if those are too much, if are stuffed too much into poetry, you will find it very difficult to read, or to have an easy reading will be really difficult. It may not, you cannot expect that to be an easy going on literature. Okay, now he says Wordsworth's purpose. What is the purpose of his telling all this? To imitate and, as far as possible, to adopt the very language of men. This is the point, very important point. Very language of men, and assuredly such personifications do not make any natural or regular part of that language. So as far as possible to make use of the language really used by men, so that, and again assuredly, he is sure that such personifications do not make any natural or regular part of that language. An ordinary man never uses such a complicated language. We get the example from Bahubali movie last time, somewhere under discussion I told you. What you feel when you tell, yes, you do something, yes, I will do. Instead of that, you are making it very dramatic, like in the same, you take some sentence from the very movie. Uttaravu Shirasal Vahikkunnu. Will you ever talk like that in your daily life context to your mother? No. Will be thrown out like anything. So this is the way we have complicated language usage as well as the very simple and normal plain language. And of course, as a natural poet, or as per the romantic tradition, Wordsworth and his contemporaries, his other co-writers, fellow writers, prefer, of course, the language, real very simple language of men. Okay, that means the human beings in general, the laymen, the normal ordinary people. Now, personification of abstract ideas is a figure of speech occasionally prompted by passion, and he rejected them as a mechanical device of style. You cannot blame the poets that they use this personification of abstract ideas. That is one of the techniques in writing. You cannot say that my poem will become really complicated, my readers will not understand if I use this or that, so let me stay away from using. That is not needed. Of course, you can refer back. You use the synecdoche in your poetry, and you do not expect your readers to understand, so that you are finding you are finding some other alternative to express. That's not needed. You can use it, but to be obsessed with using or to make it very complicated, that will be the problem. That the problem does occur. Okay, and that is why he says it's mechanical device of style. He feels it like mechanical device. Mechanical. That's not at all mechanical. Here, when it is used, it's not something very desirable term or mode of writing poetry. That's it. Mechanical. He wants everything natural. So that mechanical, of course, becomes something negative there. Mechanical is not always negative, but if you go and talk about this to a mechanical engineer, mechanical is a term very preferable for them. But in the context of our natural writing, flow of writing, to choose something, or of course Wordsworth is very particular about the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions. We have already discussed that. And in that kind of a writer, to go and select something very tough just for the sake of adding more color to the poetry, more complication, something not preferable. That's what he says again in these paragraphs. So that this is not something new, but restating the former arguments in another sentences. That's all. Okay. So I have wished to keep the reader in the company of flesh and blood, persuaded that by doing so I shall interest him. He says that flesh and blood poetry, he would like to introduce the reader in company of flesh and blood. That means you are directly taking it from real life, so that you are not unaware of, or you are not unfamiliar with anything they introduce. Okay, that's it. So that's the part, that's one session, but it's not ended there. The paragraph number 9 will continue. Just wait. Okay. Poetic diction. Now he talks about poetic diction. As much pains has been taken to avoid it as is ordinarily taken to produce it, to bring my language near to the language of men. Again the same statement. Poetic diction. That is a term which was introduced to you. I gave you the term and the description last time while teaching poetry. Hope you remember. Poetic diction. It's not the simple normal diction that you talk. Diction means words. But poetic diction, when you talk, you expect it to have some other formal features. Like poetry, the language of poetry is, we expect that, or basically we understand that to be somewhat really different from that of prose. But Wordsworth says that this poetic diction, that concept itself, he would like to throw away, because he would like to bring the language near to the language of the real man. Real man's language he would like to. So that any complication he doesn't want to promote. Because the pleasure which I have proposed to myself to impart is of a kind very different from that which is supposed by many persons to be the proper object of poetry. So this is one of the main ideas. That is the purpose, object of poetry. What do you mean by object? Object means the aim of poetry. So this pleasure is the aim, utmost aim of poetry. Wordsworth or any romantic writers take as their a goal. If a person reads my, wait, it's not clear. So he says pleasure as the utmost important part. There is their aim of poetry. That means to give pleasure to the readers. That's their aim. It was not at all the aim of the former time period, former writers. Do you expect Aristotle to impart pleasure with the writings, or can you expect Aristotle or even Plato to appreciate the writers who impart pleasure with their writings? No, they wanted every time to be strictly moral, every writing to be teaching, to give it to be somewhere teaching or some kind of complicated moral giving. But these people take a different turn. These people want to take it as a pleasure giving medium. So he says very different from that which is supposed by many persons to be the proper object of poetry. Which is the proper object of poetry that is taken by many other persons? Moral. Till date they have been strictly sticking on to moral. That is, every time you should not select this subject matter or that subject matter. You should talk like this or you should not talk like this. You should not talk like that. How can you write about such a theme in your writing? This has been the way literary world had been taking their writing, approaching towards the poetic creativity or any other creative writers. They were not having any freedom to express themselves, their ideas, because first they had to ask back the question, I have this theme in mind, but is it moral? Will it be appreciated by the moralistic call of the writing academia or the writing structures, writing power structures? No. So every time they didn't get this chance, but with romanticism, a different take on literature comes. That is, you have to afford pleasure. Any writing should be pleasure giving. So see the drastic change it is. It's a very important change that you can mark with the romantic revival. Okay. Yeah. So I have at all times endeavored to look steadily at my subject. Consequently, there is, I hope, in these forms little falsehood of description, and my ideas are expressed in language fitted to their respective importance. He says that I have been very careful. Don't think that this is a wayward expression of whatever comes to my mind. Of course, I have opted this kind of a writing, chosen this kind of a approach towards my writing after much thought. So steadily at my subject I have studied, endeavor to look steadily at my subject. Consequently, because of that reason, I hope in this forms little falsehood of description. You write about metaphysics, you write about something which is beyond your capability of understanding. That is nothing but falsehood of description. You are describing and describing and describing. You are talking at great length about something, but no one feels it as part of their lives. That is where the humane literature is the humanization of the whole world. It's in court. It's not my sentence. It's from one of the best books on history. I'll tell you. William J. Long, in that introductory part, you have this sentence which is really striking. Literature is the humanization of the whole world. It is for the reading and understanding of human beings you are writing. And see, just to think about, none of the people who are reading understands what you write, or your writings do not have anything to do with their personal or experience, part of life experience. So that literature lacks the quality of something affording pleasure, or somewhere that is lacking in its some essence. It is lacking. Okay, so that he says, Wordsworth claims his poetry, particularly his poetry or romantic literature, but here onwards now we can see Wordsworth takes its I. That means we have to take this as his opinion about his own poetry. Okay, but in one sense or other, he would like to stand as the representative of this movement as such, that is romantic revival. Okay, and my ideas are expressed in language fitted to their respective importance. So my ideas are expressed in language fitted to their respective importance. I have given that much importance to the real life-based ideas, so that those are important. You will never fail. You will not feel bored by reading my poetry. These are claims. He claims, and it is again, even at this time, even after century, it is our turn. If it is our freedom to say, to decide whether he has been true or not. Okay, I like romantic literature, the poetry in romantic literature. Row number 49 may not be able to appreciate. Row number 2 may be appreciating. So Fana may be appreciating, Hiba may not be appreciating. Jasila will be very fond of romantic writings or romantic poetry, or to Nightingale or to Westwind, but Kubra may not be able to. So this is again the personal individual choice, but the turn happens where it is, of course, he claims and he is very confident about this new style or new features in writing. Okay. For all good poetry, he says, it is good sense of poetry can claim to be the good. All good poetry have good sense, he says. Good sense, S-C-N-S-E sense. But it has necessarily cut me off from a large portion of phrases and figures of speech which have long been regarded as the common inheritance of poets. Very important part. He says that good sense I am trying to make with my poetry, my poems. But I had to do one thing in the very beginning. I had to cut me off from the large portion of phrases and figures of speech which had been taken long been taken regarded as the common inheritance of poets. He specifically mentions poets, figures of speech. Of course, which is the figure of speech in the poetry? You never ask about that in a drama. You read a drama, you read a novel, and you never stay worried, bothered about finding out figures of speech, rhyme scheme, meter, any other technical devices, poetic devices of such. Of course, you may have, but that doesn't come under your discussion. But poetry is something very different. You know, the composition itself was very different. When we talked about Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, how long a poetry it is, and the whole lines contains all the lines carry the same meter. See the artistic, the skill of that poet. He's very skillful in that regard. Can you think about writing shall we ever think about writing 4 or 5 lines in the same meter with the same stress pinch? It is something which is beyond our capabilities. Maybe among you 60 people, 50 people, there may be some person who can write down. Of course, I cannot write down in that way. That's why for people like us, we have this blank verse now. It's a free kind of poetry writing. There is no length or meter as such, but if you want, you can compose it very freely. You have freedom to compose. You can break the lines, you can shift the meter, every freedom is there nowadays in writing poetry, but it was not like that in the past. And that's why this inheritance, he says that these figures of speech, introducing them had been taken as an inheritance, that is long possessed by as generation after generation, the poetic generation after generation. You take it in that way, use it in that way, only then it is a poetry, it is a poem. So this had been the way it was taken for granted. But for making it to get my poetry more good sense, I had to cut off, necessarily I cut off me from this inheritance. I didn't use it, I do not want to use it, or I do not at least want to stuff my poetry with all these devices, See, abstained from the use of many expressions in themselves proper and beautiful, but which have been foolishly repeated by bad poets. He says that abstained. What do you mean by abstaining? You are staying away from. Abstaining myself from, that means you stay away from, you protect yourself from. Abstained from the use of many expressions in themselves proper and beautiful. Actually those expressions are fine, very good, proper, useful, but which have been foolishly repeated by bad poets. An expression is very beautiful in itself, but you are using it for the sake of using. Just think about, oh, I am writing poetry. So how can it be a poem, or how shall I say that at least without 5 or 6 figures of speech, very complicated ones especially, how can my poetry be a poetry? So you are using it here and there without any purpose, real purpose. Okay, teacher has finished off this Indian aesthetics. There you might have come across a part called use and abuse of Alankara. Right? Use and abuse of Alankara. Alankara as a device, poetic device, but that is needed. But when you abuse it, that is, use it in the context which do not actually fit, where it doesn't fit, then it becomes it's almost like an ornament on a carcass. That's a sentence used there, I think you might have come across. Ornament on a carcass. What do you mean by that? You cover a dead body with all the ornaments. It's not as you talk about the Egyptian mummies. Normally we do not do that. Do we? Do we go for covering all the ornaments? Do we ever every time decorate a dead body with all the ornaments? No. Sometimes for a token of love or respect, a very simple ornament you may be fine. That it doesn't happen nowadays, because you know the way people are obsessed with gold and ornaments and any other material. So you know, never people let a dead body to go to grave with all these wearing all these ornaments. So ornament on a dead body is not really proper. So in the same way, you make a poetry, you bring a poetry, you want to express some very simple idea, and you stuff that part with all the unlikely usages of this, whichever poetic device you are trying to stuff that. Okay, so that becomes a kind of unlikely growth on your poetry. It may not look good, but you think that because of this came, or it was introduced to you as a necessity, you may feel that you think that you took it for granted that without that my poetry will not be appreciated. So let me use it for here and there without much purpose. You do not even know why I did use it there. You do not know why did you use it there. So this is the way it becomes a kind of artificial. That's why Wordsworth says that of course these poetic devices are good, but you use it for the sake of using. You use it for the sake of people appreciating or telling you that this poet is very good. He knows much of this. He knows all these poetic devices. Is it the purpose of poetry? No. Purpose of poetry is essentially about giving pleasure by talking about simple and humble matters in the language really used by men in their daily life context. So that only when necessary you have to use these poetic devices, and not at all for the sake of using those. So this is the way Wordsworth ends this paragraph number 9. Thank you.